Good afternoon. Welcome to the November 2nd, 2011 session of the Cape Cod Regional Government Assembly of Delegates. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and we will begin with a moment of silence to honor our troops who have died in service to our country and all those serving our country in the armed forces. Thank you, and now we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will call the roll.
Richard Anderson.
Here.
Cheryl Andrews.
Here.
Ronald Bergstrom.
Here.
Leo Kukunis. Here. Christopher Kanega. James Killian.
Here.
Marcia King.
Here.
Thomas Lynch.
Here.
Teresa Martin.
Here.
Deborah McCutcheon.
Here.
Spiro Mitrakostas.
Here.
John Ullman. Paul Pilcher.
Here.
Anthony Scalise.
Here.
Julia Taylor. Mr. Speaker, we have a quorum present with 76.08% of the delegates present and 23.92% of the delegates absent.
Thank you, and I should also remind the delegates that portions of this meeting may be recorded by other means than the usual. Okay. We'll now need a motion to approve the calendar of business.
Motion to approve the calendar of business.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You should have received a copy of the Journal of October 19, 2011, our last meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the Journal? Hearing none, I need a motion to approve the Journal.
Motion to approve the Journal of October 19th, 2011.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and now we have one abstention. Now we have communications from the Board of Regional Commissioners. Anybody choose to make any comments? I see the chair of the commissioners, Mr. Doherty.
I have some unhappy news to tell you to begin with. Our colleague Sheila is home ill, and of course we all wish her a speedy recovery. Apparently the flu that has been around is caught up with her. So that's why you don't see her smiling face in the audience. We had a meeting today in which we were told by Beth Albert that we have a grant from to promote wellness. The details are in a press release, which I will give to the clerk of the Assembly to get more details on it. But it's $300,000 over a 5-year period, and we'll get $60,000 a year, and the concentration will be on healthy eating, using the other facilities within the county to be helpful. I'd suggested that the contact be made to some external organizations in order to take advantage, for example, of the Farm Bureau, and suggested that the Assembly member from Harwich might be helpful as far as doing that, since we're all interested in Buy Fresh, Buy Local. That was basically what we did today. We did have an update on municipal health care reform, but we had, since the bargaining was involved, that was an executive session. And, Paula Schnapp, whom I think is known to some of you, has taken the position of being the coordinator for the homeless management program. She would replace Trebet as far as going forward, and I think that news was greeted by an email I got from Paul Hebert, congratulating us on doing that. So I think that that's a well begun. That's about it, folks.
Any questions for the Board of Commissioners? Tom?
Just a couple. On the
trenching that was done out here, is that for, right in front of the driveway here? Is that for the open cape? Is that why and
I think so. There was, I think we had to improve the, was it the water line going up there in order to because there was an issue in the size of the pipe in order to support the pressure requirements on the fire, was it the fire suppression system? So I think that was part of that.
So-
And also for the, and this, I'm going from recollection now, but also for what used to be the jail, as far as getting that up to speed as well.
so it's not related to the conduit that they're laying, that they're
I
laying for the,
truthfully don't know, but I would assume if we're digging a trench, that it would make sense to put some sort of conduit in there. We promote this to everybody else, and we'd be remiss if we didn't do it ourselves.
I guess my question was, are they going to level it all off at some point in time? It's not the most professional job, I would say, at the moment. It's rather,
You have me at a disadvantage,
Okay.
sir, since I haven't seen it.
when you walk out, don't trip
And
on your
but
way
I
to the
think,
parking lot.
is that the pile I tripped over last week? Maybe there is, but it was dark.
That's okay. I was going to ask, though, what were your impressions of I was unable to attend, what were your impressions of the meeting with Mr. Auschenbach and Mr. O'Leary when they interviewed various, county agencies around their charge? Are you satisfied with what is coming forward thus far and that people are participating?
Well, I got there when Andrew, let's see, it was at the end of the person that spoke before Andrew Gottlieb, and I don't recall. You remember the name of that person? I will have to defer to my colleague to report on that.
Well, you asked my reaction to it, and I was hoping for some real positive suggestions and ideas. And it was all, well, things are working very well for us. We work with the county, we collaborate very well with them. And no one came out and took that leap and said, I think you should do this, or I think you should restructure in this fashion. So I was a little disappointed in that respect. I thought that it was Fred O'Regan and Andy Gottlieb and Paul Nitzwicki and who was the fourth person? Augustino. David Augustino, and he was first.
Okay, I did not see his presentation.
Okay, here. There was really nothing to see. It was here. But they were good, I thought. But I didn't think that they took the leap of faith that I was hoping that they would and made a really strong and had some really good ideas about how we might restructure, if in fact that is what they believed. They like things the way they were.
I don't mean to disagree exactly, but I thought that Paul Nitzwicki had a presentation or was making a point with regard to some suggested organizations. What I was pleased to hear was he understood, or at least in the presentation that I heard, he understood the need of having what I'd call an adequate check and balance with regard to oversight on the Cape Cod Commission. But I believe he was promoting the idea of looking at how we do things, and it seemed that the thrust of his comments had more to do with a legislative branch as opposed to the present structure that we have now. Now, out of that, I think that some discussion, as far as how it would be structured and how we would go forward, I think that that's all things that I believe should be discussed in a very open way among all of us as far as what would be the best thing to do going forward with regard to that organization. But the most important thing that I think that he said was the need to have a strong legislative body that provided the check and balance on the Cape Cod Commission, and felt, and to me that was supportive of what the intent of the act was to begin with.
Actually, in reflecting on what Paul had to say, he didn't really come out and say we don't need county commissioners. But what he said was, you were there. Yeah. But what he said was...
It was Ron that said that.
No. But what he said was that there should be a strong executive didn't necessarily make it singular or plural, but there should be an assembly or a legislative body of some configuration, and there should be a strong county executive, and it wouldn't necessarily be in the form of commissioners, which, is a reasonable consideration.
Julie?
Well, I was certainly going to bring this up
Yeah.
later. Do we want to talk about it
Well,
now
I
or
think,
later?
I think we can bring it up under reports of committees, and that way we can discuss it a little more thoroughly, rather than grill the poor commissioners.
Well, I don't feel as though we're being grilled. I feel this is an opportunity to
Well,
engage in a useful
It
discussion
isn't over-
within
It isn't
the-
over yet, Bill. So you still- I just have one question for you, Bill. Going back to Beth Albert, some of the emails I've been getting on the Human Services Advisory Committee suggest that they've sort of gone to ground, and they're looking at their charge, and they're looking at their, at their role going forward, but I haven't been able to get a hold of Beth and talk to her or attend any of the meetings. I guess they didn't have a meeting this month, it was canceled. Has she discussed anything to you as to the role of has this been a topic of discussion at all among the commissioners? Or?
I guess I don't understand your question completely. If it's a case of the Human Service Department following the charge of being an honest broker, providing coordination, communication, and consolidation with regard to services, I think that, that they're continuing to follow that. And I believe that her representation on the various committees support that.
Yeah, well, no, I'm not questioning Beth's participation. I'm saying that the committee themselves were, I don't know, I think this was emailed to all of us, going to look into their role in the county. What is their relationship with the commissioners? What is their relationship with the
Wait a minute, you're talking about the Human Service Advisory Committee or the Human Rights Commission?
Human Service? Did I say rights? I meant human services.
No, you said Human Services, okay.
Yeah, and they're looking at their role, their future role, and I know, so you have not heard anything about that?
No, I
Okay.
can't speak to that. I don't.
Yeah, we've only heard that there's been a bit of a dust-up with the Human Rights Commission, but not with Human Services, so that's news to us.
But at the same time, I think it's a useful thing for any organization or any committee to take a look at itself in order to ensure that they're fulfilling what they understand their mission to be. I might mention, with regard to committees, I was delighted to see that Brenda Boylan had agreed to continue on the Lyme disease, and there's a new name for them. It's a Barnstable County Lyme and Other Tick-Borne Diseases Task Force. Now, that doesn't have a ring to it. You might say BC-LTD, but at the same time, the most important part is that they have resuscitated themselves. They focused on Barnstable County because the islands have created their own task force. We have two physicians, two nurses, and someone who's I guess well, there are two doctors, two nurses, and who's the guy from Eastham who's been on it for?
I know he is, but I can't think of.
Well, in any case,
Yeah.
the committee has reformed itself with some really, with good members, with good reputation, and with some experience in this area. So we're looking to see them, do good work, continue the good work that that they've already started.
Okay. Yeah.
Can you tell me, has this MMA consulting group report been provided to the members of the county government committee? And what's what's going to happen with that report in relation to this other effort?
You might-
I would say it's running more of a parallel course. Right now, we have a meeting set up to meet with the department heads to ask for their feedback on the report, because the report, you've probably read it, I'm sure you have, it creates like 4 lead departments in the county. So that will probably happen within the next 2 weeks. So we're working through that because we want the results of that report to be part of the budget process when we begin it in January.
Has that report been provided to members of all the members of the special committee on county government?
I believe it was.
Distributed, and if,
Yeah, I think we were.
I know it was distributed to all the department heads, but I also thought it was distributed to the special commission.
As did I. As a matter of fact, there were some other things that I had sent to to the committee, because there was some stuff from, was it the Collins group, at UMass? That had some comments with regard to Martha's Vineyard and their organization. I made sure that they got that. And I gave them some reference to some other, some other parts of things. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that I believe it was supplied. And if it, no, who would be? No, they have a scribe now, right? Was it Marilyn Lopes?
Who is it?
Marilyn Lopes has been, they were looking for somebody to take minutes and take notes, so they do have somebody like that now. So
Okay.
Pat Eldridge would be the one to contact to find, to see what they're missing. It's very important that, that they see all of the things that we have, because they're supposed to be looking at everything. And I'm pretty sure that they did get that as part of the original package.
Yeah. I think the auditor's report, which was an excellent assessment of the county finances, would be something that should be made available to them too. I mean, because that's, of course, the bottom line. It's whether the taxpayers' money is being spent wisely, and it is. So, I mean, according to the auditor's
Ron, I would be
report.
less of a Republican if I didn't express great concern over the taxpayers' responsibility in these matters.
Mr. Speaker,
Yes,
are you still asking questions?
sure.
The quarterly revenues and expenditures are in.
Yes, they are.
Have you had a chance to,
I do have
go over them with the
a mention
administrator?
from our good friend, Mark Zielinski in his report. October Registry of Deeds were $546,793 for the month, and we're above, it was 7.2% ahead of the same period last year. For the year-to-date, the revenues are just a bit behind the same period as last year on the 4-month period, 2.8% behind.
we got a copy of that information. I'm just wondering if you could put that into context. The quarterly numbers are in for both revenues and expenses.
This is not
Are we needing to make adjustments, or are you going to wait another quarter?
I believe
What's
that
the
Mark
recommendation?
had made a presentation to the Finance Committee as the chair of the Finance Committee here.
No.
And as part of that, he did respond to that and make some comments with regard to going forward.
That happened prior to the quarterlies coming in. So I'm wondering if you've had a chance to meet with Mark to discuss where you stand at this point, and if adjustments are going to happen between now and the end of the year, or you're going to wait till December 31st to discuss adjustments?
As of today, when we did discuss this, however briefly, we're convinced that we're on track, and there's no need at this point to make any adjustments. However, if the variance becomes considerable, we naturally would take responsibility to do that.
Bill, and I'll defer to the Finance Committee, the Vice Chair, but the projected, even though the revenues are on close to what we did last year, the projected revenues were somewhere considerably more than what we did last year. Am I right about that? About 14%, was it? 7%. So they had a 7% increase in projected revenues. So if we're 2% down, then we're actually 9% down. I mean, I'm not gonna go into it because it's probably too substantive, but I just want everybody to understand that we're tracking projected revenues to match the expenditures for this fiscal year. I mean, is that where I am?
Thank you for your comments.
Okay. Yeah. Thought I couldn't let that pass. Anything else from the, hello? Anything else from the, no? Thank you very much.
Oh, before I leave, I have one question for all of you. Did any of you lose power? So did I. Okay.
Okay, is there we have communications from any public officials? Any communications from members of the public? Hearing none, the Assembly will now convene, and we'll start with reports of committees. We touched, oh yeah, Paul, you have something for us this afternoon, yeah.
Microphone, please. Sorry. The Committee on Economic Affairs met this afternoon. We will have a fuller report with the minutes, but we did talk about setting up a meeting with the EDC, either with their program committee as they move forward in their grants, or asking some of the officers of the EDC to come and meet with us sometime in the next 4 to 6 weeks. And we also talked about an investigation of economic analysis of regionalization, which I will not try to explain, but we'll let Teresa, who brought this forward, and where we're going with it.
I won't try and explain either, except to give a heads up that we agreed I'll contact the Collins Center at UMass Boston, and they're willing to come down and chat with us a little bit more. Basically, the state for 20-some years has been building models and doing some economic analysis that may be useful tools for looking at as we look at issues of how to create an infrastructure that supports the needs of business in the region, and many of those things touch on regional infrastructure that they've been looking at. So, long story short, call them, invite them down, invite everyone to come and hear them.
Right, and we are, when we do have that time set up, we are hoping that maybe we can get one or more of the commissioners to come and sit in with us, because they are obviously the budget creators, and this might have some budget implications.
Okay. The other committee that met, unless there's something else, was, of course, the Special Committee on County Governance. And Julie, did you want to comment on that?
Yes, I've got it now. And I think you should add, we might have seen it differently or heard it differently, and Deborah was there also, so she might, but with some editorial reporting, which is hard for me not to do. There were 4 speakers, and if you ever had the feeling that you wouldn't want to make, that the bureaucrats from the government might not be as impressive as the representatives from something else, I don't think that was a problem. I was very impressed with both Paul and Andrew. I thought they did an excellent job, and anyone who ever had any, I don't know how much all the people on this committee, because it's rather large, how much interaction they have with county government, if any, and I would think they would have been impressed. The Chamber of Commerce report said basically nothing. That wasn't the fault necessarily of the person who presented it. He's very nice and smart, but they didn't wish to commit themselves to anything at this time. And it was almost, they wanted to forcefully state that they were extremely interested in the issues. That was the extent of that. Andrew took a sort of philosophical position, didn't want to particularly talk about structure, but did want to say that wastewater, which he's particularly interested in, is of the correct scale for the government level to be working on it, to be the county. He felt the towns were the wrong scale because watersheds did not intersect with town lines. That was not to say that there was going to be some county sewer system, not at all. He assumed there would be a variety of solutions, some of which might include sewering, but that the county was I think this, I could be putting words in his mouth, but basically he felt that the county was in a position to best represent individuals who are going to be affected by whether we get sewered or not, or would be affected by sewering. I guess this means that a financial relationship could be reasonable between individual households and the county, in that different towns are going to aren't going to be in a position to solve the problems in any kind of economically viable way. I guess he felt that you could have a town could do something. At any rate, I would gather that he didn't feel that the existing county government was in a position to take the leadership role in something like this in its present form. So that if we had a vision of this as a problem that had to be addressed and could only be addressed economically in some format other than individual towns, then the county would have to make some significant changes to be in a position to do that. But it was really about the vision. Did the county see itself as taking on that role? If it did, then you'd want to make these changes. If it didn't want to and wanted to pass on it, then that was fine. Not probably good for touring, but Paul took a different approach, which was much more oriented to structure. He wanted a strong executive. I thought he pretty much said that wouldn't be 3 commissioners. I guess he thought that an administrator was not, I mean, he saw the commissioners as the executive. The administrator would not be sufficiently strong. And so I felt that he was suggesting a strong executive, which would probably only be 1 person, and then a elected representative legislative body, which would be elected regionally. I thought he was pretty clear about that. And similar to House districts that we have on the Cape in the General Court. He specifically mentioned the importance of having the town managers be involved in county government. And, you know, I've said in the past that we'd had these changes. Some of these came about because the selectmen were no longer full-time people. They were no longer interested in running the budget, et cetera, and that's what the situation was 20 years ago when we went to the assembly. He's now not saying get the selectmen to be the people involved, but instead get the town managers. Now, whether he had any concept of them being written into the charter, he certainly didn't go that far, but I think his view was pretty clear on a single strong executive and a regionally elected legislature.
Yeah. I'd just like to say that when Andrew, I don't know if you guys have been following the legal ramifications of this. I mean, we discussed it briefly, the lawsuit between, or the potential of a lawsuit. We've been notified that there may be a lawsuit between the Conservation Law Foundation suing the federal government to enforce certain whatever acts of this, that, and the other thing. And the county anticipated that they might be a party to that, and that has not happened. However, they have become voluntarily a party to it. In other words, they're sitting at the table. So my question to Andrew Gottlieb was, does the county there, because it sees itself as having a role in any settlement? In other words, as some kind of consent order comes down, some kind of settlement comes down, would it be anticipated that the county might be named in that settlement as a way of enforcing the regulations? And his answer to that was, it was the county's position that they are not in any way responsible under the regulations at all. So their position is, it doesn't have to do with us. It said they're only sitting there because they want to see what's going on. So, you know, on the other hand, I pressed him and he said, of course, the court can do whatever it wants, you know. And he also emphasized that the substance of the potential litigation is that rather than have the towns be responsible for cleanup as it is currently constructed, that they would designate each individual household as a point source. So really, they would bypass the federal and state governments in saying that you, as a homeowner, are now responsible to adhere to these federal regulations. And so they're trying to, obviously, that would become an impossible situation. So I think that they're trying, from what I can read it, they're trying to negotiate a settlement, or at least see that this litigation goes forward in such a way that it doesn't put an undue burden on the households, and do whatever the county can do as an umbrella agency to make it easier for both the towns and the individuals to go forward. That was his take on that. So we don't know what's going to happen because it's currently in litigation. Paul, on the other hand, did strongly, he was the first one. The others, it's interesting, we asked about the report about the overlook and the county administrative report, because a lot of people who came in the door they're still stuck on that. In other words, they're still saying, well, geez, the county operates well and my agency does this and does that. Rob tried to get them back to structure. Paul directly emphasized structure. He, according to the lines that Julie just spoke of, he did say that he thought the assembly should be elected on a regional basis. So I pressed him on that, and I said, well, the alternative to towns would be precincts, because they're not going to divide Chatham into West Chatham, South. In other words, when it comes to the ballot, that's all you're left with. That's as far as the Secretary of the State will go in dividing up towns. It's precincts. Each precinct gets a ballot. So he said, well, that they'll find a way to do it, and so on. And so and he also emphasized he also mentioned that he thought that 3 county commissioners were problematic in a sense that 2 people could simply, it's too easy to get 2 people out of 3 to agree on everything than it is to get 5. He thought it would be too much of a temptation to have a division in that way. Other than that, I was surprised to find that the Workforce Investment Board, some questions came as to their financing, their role in the county, and they're another agency that operates through some sort of intermunicipal agreement. In other words, the money goes through the county, but we don't really have oversight, and so somebody else has oversight, and that got to be a little sticky.
Yeah,
so Julie,
that was interesting, because they're basically running as a 301C corporation. So the federal government provides the money. The appointed members review the budget. So the people making, the appointed members are appointed by the commissioners, but it's one of these situations a little bit like CVEC and Cape Light Compact, where there isn't, it's not a direct, here's the elected official and they're in charge. It's definitely not that way at all.
He stated that
that's not to say it's bad, but it's definitely not
good,
responsive to elected officials.
He said that the appointments were made by a designated commissioner. He said that in this case Sheila made the appointed. It wasn't made by the board, but they would designate a commissioner. This is what he said. I don't know if it's true. He said that it is true. The chair. Okay, well, he was then he was behind the times.
The chair that makes the appointment.
Yes, we'll suspend the rules for Commissioner Doherty. Yeah.
The chair may may designate another commissioner to do it, and I took that prerogative and appointed.
Okay. So that was a little interesting. The only thing I thought of on my way driving home is that if let's say that we were elected by districts, instead of by towns, the towns of Provincetown, Truro, Eastham, Wellfleet, and half of Orleans would have 1 delegate.
Actually, I think it depends on how many delegates.
Well, I'm talking 15, you're right. Depends. If we had 25, it'd be different. But however it's divided is...
They want more, they want less.
Let's say 7.
All right, 7. So that means that everybody east of Bass River would have one representative. Barnstable would have probably 2, or 3. And so it would
It would be similar to what we have for states.
Yeah. So that's where he was headed in that direction. So, I don't know. Do you have anything to say there? You were a conscientious observer.
I thought the discussion was interesting. I thought Paul Nizwicki was very clear that he's sort of going with the whoever those people are, Consulting Group model, where he wants a strong county administrator, and he basically at one point said appointed by the legislature is what he was, the model he was looking at. I thought that was interesting. I didn't hear he didn't flesh out the idea of regional representation as much as
No, he didn't.
there was speculation about it, and how it would work is, I think, a real question.
Well, I mean, I think on the first point, if we had a parliamentary system, right, that you guys would elect a speaker, and then the speaker would become prime minister, and then he would run the government, right? Isn't that how it would work? Well, I don't think we're going to go there, but that's an interesting alternative. But no, I didn't see that I didn't get the point that he was hoping that we would appoint yeah, well,
Well, they would hire them,
Yeah.
if it were like a town manager system. But he didn't dwell on either the elimination of the assembly as it exists or the elimination of the commissioners as it exists. He was, trying to go over that rather quickly, but I thought it was pretty clear that he wanted a smaller legislature which was regionally elected, and that the town's input would come through some way of involving the town managers.
yeah, all right. Tom, did you have a comment?
I think it's interesting, we're still doing the form and function, we're trying to figure out what the form would. And as to the first point, when you're saying, when one speaker was talking about we might not have the right, be structured properly to deal with something like wastewater. Well, you could probably say the same thing about whether we were going to take over all the schools, or we're going to take all the Department of Public Works, or we're going to do all the countywide police force. We're not structured in a way to try to take that over. Mm-hmm. So I think we've tried to create vehicles where, the county is partnering with the town or giving directions to the town, and so you either have to really change the way you're structured and the taxation powers and everything else if you're going to turn those duties in some way over to a regional structure. I like the strong executive and a legislative body like this. Quite frankly, I'd keep it one person, one town, mainly because it still keeps you connected to every town. If you broke it up along and had 5 districts the way the legislature is right now, Barnstable would have 3 in its delegation, mm-hmm. and people would probably think that was unfair if we were lobbying them about to 3 people, and 7 towns were lobbying 1 person, or maybe they have a little bit of Orleans too, so they might have 2. I don't know. They might consider themselves a part of the district with 2. But I think there's merits clearly to a strong executive, of giving them the powers to do certain things that they don't have right now. But I'm glad to see they're having these kinds of discussions. Sounds like it's going to be fruitful.
I don't put you on the spot, but I just had the thought that the town of Barnstable is organized in very similar fashion, where they have 13 elected representatives who in turn elect a strong town manager. Now, I'm not without getting into current events, just looking at that structure, whether or not some people think that 13 is just an unwieldy number, but obviously we have 15, it seems to work, so.
Yeah, I don't think it's the number. I think, the debate we always have, or the folks have, and it's the same one in the legislature. You're representing your town at the legislative level, or you're thinking statewide, and when do you make those choices that just benefit your community, or in point of fact have a statewide impact? And I think at the local level, it's a similar sort of thing. You're trying to protect your precinct, but you also look and say, what's the best for the town? And it's difficult sometimes, I think, for anyone to vote against the interests of one precinct when they're looking, when it might not benefit them. But I don't think the number is so much. It's just it's getting folks thinking on a town-wide perspective, and it's having us think on a county-wide perspective at our level. So I don't find 15 to be particularly unwieldy, and I like the fact that, if I want to know something about Yarmouth, I know who to go to, or if it's Falmouth, if it were someone representing Falmouth, Mashpee, Bourne, and a little bit of Wareham, or, but actually, on this side of the bridge, naturally, except for parts of Bourne, we would, there's now you're a little confused, because they're weighing, gee, is this good for Mashpee as well as it is for Falmouth as well as, so I kind of like this format. So.
Yeah, I'm leaning in that direction. I don't know what the ultimate outcome will be, but I'm more concerned about the awareness of the voters. We've gone through all sorts of organizations here. We've talked to CBEC and we've talked to, all of which are basically town-wide based. Yet, at a certain point, you do get disconnected from the average citizen. I mean, how many, there's always complaint, well, who knows who the assembly members are? But in the end of the day, I represent Chatham, so that's something concrete. If I represented a couple of districts, I think that would be just one more removed from the public's awareness of what I do and what any of us does. So, I mean, I don't know what the outcome of this will be, but I'm concerned that we maintain our ties to the citizens, that responsibility is maintained there, so they're at least aware of and can control in a real sense who represents them on this body and in the county. Yeah. Okay, Cheryl. Oh, and I'll get to Paul. Didn't mean to pass him up. Sorry.
2 quick points. One, I am convinced that if it wasn't for the issue of wastewater, none of this we wouldn't be talking about any of this. That fundamentally, that is the issue that is driving most of this conversation. And I'd like to just remind all of you, because you've been there from the beginning, but I was more intimately involved with the Wastewater Collaborative. The Wastewater Collaborative was formed with 15 members, 1 from each town, just like this group. And after about 2 years, all of a sudden there was this big push to talk about structure. Somehow it just wasn't doing what it was being told, that group. We weren't thinking right, I guess. And it came down from on high. It's amazing how identical this is. Let's change the structure to 7 people on the collaborative, and they won't be tied to their towns. We'll appoint them. And I think you all know where that ended up. That was a brutal discussion. It involved tons of boards of selectmen. It involved all of you. And it is astounding, really, how much that whole conversation is what we're having right now. And I know you all remember this. It's not that long ago, but I think we need to be mindful how much that one issue is driving this conversation.
Okay, I don't want to stray too much. We're actually reporting what the committee said here rather than get too substantive, but otherwise we're going to run into trouble. But Paul, did you have anything to say about?
Well, I did send a letter to Julia to this effect, and I believe it's been passed on to Rob O'Leary. But one of the comments I made was, and I would make here, is that we have regional representation, as you say, in our state representative districts, and I don't think any of us on the Outer Cape feel that our interests are not being represented by our state representative. In fact, the fact that our state representative represents multiple towns means that she has to make a point of scheduling meetings and plugging herself into the things that go on in all of the towns in that district. So I'm not afraid of the idea of a regional representation, and I would say that it might be that in my part of the world it would enhance the interest in the assembly, where they're right now, when they look at the way the vote is weighted, it's pretty minimal.
Yes.
I just have a process question. I was wondering if you could remind us how many more of these sessions there are, what other kinds of people are going to talk, what time period, and what's the outcome?
Well, the only thing I can say is that in the beginning of these meetings, they were anticipating that if changes are going to be made, they would have to be put on the ballot in November, a year from November. In order to do that, they would have to notify the Secretary of State what they want to put on the ballot by, like, April. He's hoping to wrap it up by January, I think, is what I think he mentioned. Anybody remember that? Did he say January?
In the
December?
first meetings, they said they thought they'd have, correct me if I'm wrong, Julia, they thought they'd have things wrapped up in a preliminary report by December. And they're now rapidly backing off of that and talking about, last was said something about, perhaps February.
Yeah. No sign of exactly where this is going.
There's no timetable. Nobody's
No.
drafted anything. There's no outline for any. Nothing substantive as far as I can tell, other than the presentations has been done. Is that right?
There's no notification of it. Now, I don't know if, see, that's the big question that's hanging over this whole thing, is there's no indication of how this is going to proceed. Let's say they came to a decision. Let's say they made a recommendation to maybe have a strong manager and to have a regionally representative body. Well, I mean, that changes the county charter. County charter has to be changed on the ballot. It also has to be changed by the legislature, has to pass on that. So, and yeah, Julie, what do you?
If it's a charter change, it would go either to the assembly and then to the ballot, or if it were not passed by the assembly, it would need a
Petition.
signature drive
Yeah.
to get on the ballot. It probably wouldn't need to go to Boston. Probably would not need to go to the legislature if it's because we have a home rule charter which we're entitled to change. Now, tax, new tax, that's another story. Change in the relationship with the Cape Cod Commission, that's another story. But just changing the executive and the legislative branch, I think could go on the ballot from the assembly or from a petition.
Mr. Speaker,
Yes.
rather than try to avoid to have a substantive discussion about these issues, can we put this on the
Yeah, we're going to.
on the calendar for the next meeting?
I'm trying to dance a thin line here, but yeah.
I think it's a very productive discussion.
But I want everybody to be aware of this because it affects all of us as well.
Oh, I agree. I'm biting my tongue. I wanted to chime in about Mr. Gottlieb's interpretation of who's suing who as well, but if you're not going to entertain that conversation, let's put it on the agenda and have it.
Yeah, I think
Especially since these agendas are going to be thin the next 2 weeks anyways.
Yeah.
By the way, this committee is meeting on the 10th and the 16th again, at 3:30 on the 10th and 6:30 on the 16th.
Yeah, they're trying to. They've invited Tim Murray, who rolled over his car this morning. Hopefully, he's all right. He dusted himself off, and he seems to be fine. But he's so the next meeting will be scheduled according to his availability. All right. I guess there's no other committee meeting. Yeah. Your mic?
I think this is a really interesting question as to, how they intend to proceed and what kind of legislative remedy that we ought to discuss, because at the last hearing, at the last meeting, Senator O'Leary was talking about legislation to Boston, and I didn't think that was the vehicle, and I've gotten the impression that nobody's really kind of thought out exactly
I think
what
it's
they're
if you
doing.
want to change the money, you got to go to Boston. That he asked the question about that, and I mean, that was what it was.
My
If you want to
impression is
change
that the
taxation-
changes in 2005 were passed on the ballot, but it went to Boston. It was held up in the legislature because of the controversy with the sheriff. So
that's something to do with the state. Obviously, that had to be approved. Getting rid of it, but it wasn't the charter change so much as you got to get the state to take over the money. Again, that was about money. If we do something that's not about money, I don't think you have to have it approved in Boston.
All right. Well,
But-
we'll address this at a later date. Is there a report from the clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do have a report this week. I want to point out to the delegates that in each of your folders, I have placed the budget calendar for the upcoming season and highlighted the date of February 15th. I did speak to the treasurer and the finance director and the county administrator, and we should expect to receive the budget on February 15th. The next item that I want to update you on, I take great pride in this, is to report that the charter that you will now go and look at online is updated and accurate and correct. And I worked with Attorney Tri over the last several months to clear up all those issues regarding which one is the right one. And we finished it this week, and I immediately updated that. I've sent a couple of hard copies over to the Commissioner's office and alerted them to that fact, so I think we're good to go. Next item, I am looking into where we might all have our holiday gathering this year. Just to give you a heads up, it's going to be on the 21st of December, and from what I understand, it happens immediately following the adjournment of the meeting. And I am giving some serious consideration to keeping it in the village area. As soon as I have all the specifics and the details, including the cost, I will let each one of you know. I hope to be able to do that by the next meeting because, believe it or not, we only have 3 more meetings before Christmas. So I'll be doing that and getting back to you and, trying to keep it, again, in the price range that I guess you have been accustomed to over the past several years. And the last item that I want to let you know about is that I will be out of the office Friday, Monday, and Tuesday. There will be a message on my phone, a message on the door. I will have access and be able to check my emails, but I can't go into my hard drive and send you anything from my computer, but I can certainly answer simple questions. We'll be back on next Wednesday. I don't think it's going to interrupt any meeting schedules or anything like that, so hopefully you won't even notice that I'm gone.
Okay.
And that's it.
Okay. Under other business, we had, it's not really a report from the committee, but as you know, we had a meeting of the committee that looked at CVEC and the Cape Light Compact. I have talked to Maggie Downey briefly, and it seems that she's either unwilling or doesn't feel it necessary to come back before the Assembly, and the committee was planning on presenting written questions to her that she would answer. She'll be given copies of our journal of that, the minutes of that meeting. Janice has highlighted some of the concerns of the members. I think that our meeting, we have a meeting tentatively scheduled for the 16th. It may be that we will have to meet and get together and decide specifically what we want answered, but the members, the 5 members of the committee are perfectly, perfectly capable of in writing or emailing the questions to Maggie, but having a little bit of a trouble on how to proceed. Not the time is of the essence, but I think it was a productive meeting. It's just now was the next step, and we're going to have to flesh that out on the 16th in one form or another. Is there any other business to be brought before the Assembly?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moving second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?